Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 1, Episode 19, Out of Sight. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. So the episode starts at a party for one of the sisters' friends, Dee, who Piper has cooked the picnic for the party for her son David because she wouldn't have been able to afford it otherwise. And then Prue is called away. Meanwhile, David, who is playing with his friends in the park, loses the ball into the bushes and then sends the ball back to his friends. But hears a meow, decides to go into the bushes to investigate, and this is when the Grimlock comes out to try to kidnap him. Prue sees this and levitates the Grimlock and David. However, the Grimlock still manages to get away with David, and she is seen by a reporter. The reporter then, as they are. So basically, then the cops are called to the park. Prue says what she saw, but obviously isn't believed by the cops, and then the sisters decide to start investigating because obviously it is a supernatural occurrence, and that is what they do. And they have trouble at first finding the Grimlocks. However, Phoebe does find a lead that two boys previously had also been kidnapped from the same park in the same way 20 years ago. One of them survived and had mentioned that monsters had stolen him, and so she goes to visit the child who survived 20 years ago named Brent Miller, finding out that the monster took his eyesight and basically speaks to him about what he might remember and is able to narrow down a location where David might have been taken. The sisters then, after hearing that that the Grimlocks took Brent's sight and that they had mentioned auras, are able to find the Grimlocks within the Book of Shadows and the vanquishing potion that is needed to defeat them. However, they are missing one of the key ingredients, so Prue decides that she's going to pick that up after work. However, while she is at work, the reporter comes and basically lets her know that he saw her, that he's writing an article, and asks for her to give a comment. She, of course, kicks him out. The reporter then goes to Andy and basically outs Prue to Andy, talks about how he saw her use her powers, and her name keeps coming up in a lot of unsolved murder cases. Any comments on that? Andy, of course, shuts him down. And then when Piper and Prue return home, the reporter tries to set them up by sending a fake baby carriage, well, like a baby stroller with a fake baby in it, in front of a moving vehicle. Piper freezes the street. They go and check, realizes it's fake, and then return to the step. However, Piper's purse is on the wrong shoulder, which gives the reporter video evidence of their powers, and so he decides to stake out the house while they do brew the potion. He even tries to come in at one point to try to get them to admit that they have magical powers. Phoebe and Piper, ahead of time while Prue is brewing the potion, head to the storm drains first so that they can find the Grimlocks and hopefully freeze them over and over until Prue arrives. However, while they are in the storm drains, Piper ends up injured. She falls down through like kind of a hole onto a grate, and Phoebe covers her up because she's now unconscious and then leaves to call Prue. However, this of course makes a racket, alerting the Grimlocks to the fact that there is somebody in the storm drains, so they start roaming those tunnels. And then Phoebe calls Prue. Prue, now on a time crunch, admits on video to being a witch to the reporter, and he insists on coming with her, or he's not going to fix her car, which he has damaged. She then brings him with her and at first tells him to stay outside because she doesn't want him to get injured, even though he is a bit of an a-hole. And so she goes in with Phoebe, who is waiting there, so that they can check on Piper and find the Grimlocks, and has brought the vanquishing potions. However, the reporter decides to follow them anyways and quickly falls victim to one of the Grimlocks. And then Andy arrives and he follows them as well, and he finds the reporter, Eric Lohman, already dead. And then when he turns around, he of course sees the the Grimlock. He shoots at it. That does nothing because that's not how it can be defeated. And then luckily Prue arrives, throws the Grimlock away, and basically tells Andy that that was a demon. Yes, she has powers. They'll talk later. Get Piper out because she is injured. So Andy decides to take Piper out of the tunnels while Phoebe and Prue then continue to hunt the Grimlocks and use the vanquishing potion on the first Grimlock, and then manage to find the boys and use the vanquishing potion on the second Grimlock, which restores David's sight. And he is excited because he knew that she had superpowers and is happy to be saved, and had been reassuring the other boy while they were locked up, that, you know, his mom's friend has superpowers and is going to save them. And then lo and behold, they did so, which is a really sweet moment. And then basically the children go to the station. Brent arrives. We find out his sight has been restored with the slaying of the Grimlocks. And then Prue and Andy start to have a conversation, but then reporters arrive. And while all of this is going on, we have kind of a side plot where Piper has been talking about the fact that Josh keeps asking to talk, and she assumes that it's the exes talk where they talk about their past relationships and what they want going forward, and she's not sure she's ready for that because she doesn't know yet whether she wants to continue into like a official relationship or whether she wants to kind of stay ambiguous about it or even stay together. However, when they do eventually have the talk, when she goes to him to see if he has a map to try to find the location of the Grimlocks, it turns out that in fact he was offered a job elsewhere out of the city, and that he's leaving, but if he sees a future with her, or if she thinks there is a future, then he'll stay for her. However, we find out that when she is injured in the storm drains, the person she thinks about is Leo, not Josh, and so at the end of the episode decides that she is going to tell him to take the job, as if she's thinking about Leo, she's not thinking about Josh. And that is our episode in a nutshell. Now that I've rewatched the episode, I will be ranking the episode on two lists. The first list is a mostly objective ranking list, which is void emotion, and then the personal ranking list, which is the list that is my opinion personally on the episode. So the mostly objective rank values that I felt applied to this episode are highlighted on the screen. And first off, we have our single episode supporting character introductions, which of course is Eric Lohman, we have Brent Miller, we have David Hatcher, we have the Grimlocks named Janor and Kava, which already brings us up to 5 points. Then we have our multi-season main character growth, which is Prue in this episode for the first time channels her power through her hands rather than her eyes, which shows that her power is growing, which is something that has been promised since episode 1, that their powers would grow and evolve as they do as witches. And so that is worth 4 points, bringing us to 9. We then have our supporting relationship development, which is that Piper and Josh have gone on 3 dates between episodes. And then, of course, they're about to have the talk, so we can see that they have progressed in their relationship, which is worth 2 points. We also get I also want to honorably mention here, actually, Phoebe and Brent do kind of have a flirty vibe throughout the episode. However, it's never confirmed that they are flirting or interested at all, and it never goes anywhere. But I think it's worth mentioning. Not worth any points, though. Then we have our multi-episode supporting character development, which is with Andy. Andy is first told about Prue's powers by the reporter Eric, follows her into the drain, attacked by the Grimlock, so now he knows about demons for certain, though he already had an inkling probably from the Wendigo. And then he gets saved by Prue using her powers, and so obviously that reveals that Prue has magic and the secret's out, and it's now up to them to decide what they want to do going forward, and specifically Andy, what he wants to do with the information going forward. But that is also worth 2 points. And then we have our world building. And I felt world building applied in this episode because this is the first time when we see them use a genuine vanquishing potion. We've seen them use rituals which have ingredients placed into a cauldron type thing in the past. We've seen them use little spell sachets, which are, like pouches with a few additional herbs and spices and such to provoke a spell or to like make the spell stronger. But this is the first time it's genuinely like cook on the stove potion that they are using and that they are making to vanquish a demon. So, being a milestone, that counts as world building to me, and that is worth 4 points as well, which bring us up on the positive side all the way up to 17. However, there are some negatives in this episode, one of which is a weak or dislikable supporting character. In this case, that was very much Eric Lohman. Now, I do typically put the little caveat on that it's excluding characters that are meant to be disliked, and to a certain extent, I would say Eric's meant to be a sleazy character that we dislike. However, when I put that there, excluding characters meant to be disliked, I mean more like the main villain of the story, like the demons, wouldn't be held accountable for their poor behaviors or their dislikable behaviors because that's what they are meant to be and do. In this case, most reporters would be considered to be ethical. It shouldn't be a negative character, and yet the way the character is made very dislikable by his own behaviors. And so I think it counts in this case. But he's very sleazy. So that is, of course, a -4 points, bringing us down to 13. We obviously have the negative messaging and or behaviors, and this of course again is to do with Eric Lohman. He obviously tries to blackmail Prue, he tries to manipulate Prue, he tries to threaten Prue, all of which are very poor behaviors, and as he is a mortal and not a demon or warlock, it is inexcusable in this case because obviously if you are an evil creature, you are meant to do evil things. So it doesn't really count in that sense because that's just the expectation for you. But if you are a human, if you are immortal in this series, the expectations for you are that you are not going to be doing very evil things, and so obviously that's a bad thing. And also later on he does try to force his way into the house, which would be trespassing, which is also very negative behaviors. And so that is, of course, a -2, bringing us to 11. And then our final negative for this episode is the supporting relationship regression or breakup. And obviously, this has to do with Josh and his job offer, which will cause him to leave. He does give Piper the opportunity to save the relationship, saying he will stay if there is a future between them, if she can see a future between them, because he does really like her. However, she ultimately decides, no, not interested. She thinks of Leo. When she is injured, that means she's not thinking of Josh, her words, and therefore she decides at the end of the episode that she is going to tell Josh to go ahead and take that job offer, effectively ending their relationship. And that is worth -2 points, which brings us for this episode to a total of 9 out of 10 on our mostly objective ranking. So now I'll remind you of our season 1 rankings so far on our mostly objective ranking. In first place, we have Something Wicked This Way Comes, I've Got You Under My Skin, From Fear to Eternity, Is There a Woogie in the House, That 70s Episode, Wicked Envy, Secrets and Guys, When Bad Warlocks Turn Good. This episode ranks 9th so far, and that is Out of Sight. Dead Man Dating, Feats of Clay, Dream Sorcerer, The Witch is Back, Thank You for Not Morphing, Which Proves It Anyway, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts. The Wendigo, The Wedding from Hell, and then in 19th place is The Fourth Sister. So now my personal impressions of the episode. Obviously, giving them a 24-hour time period in order to save David brings up the tension in the episode. Basically, Grimlocks, what they do is they kidnap a child, they steal the child's eyesight, and then they have to keep that child alive for at least 24 hours, as that is how long the sight that will give them their aura, like allow them to see auras, will last, provided the child is still alive. If they kill the child, they lose the sight, which is what gives them hope that David will be found alive and the time frame in which to find David alive. We then, of course, have the fact that the effects for the aura I find kind of interesting. Basically, we see through the Grimlock's eyes a couple of times when they do kill a philanthropist, and then later when they're trying to kill Phoebe and trying to kill Prue via their auras, and even Piper briefly is almost killed by the auras. And I like the way they do the effect because it at first kind of shows like a golden glow around the person, and then as the Grimlock kills them, it shows basically like it looks like they're being strangled by their own goodness. The aura that's around them kind of concentrates around their neck and starts to be absorbed inside of their neck while they choke. So the aura, which is golden, which is showing that they are so good, is the very thing that looks like it's going to kill them, which I felt was very interesting and a good choice. And then there, of course, was David. He was a very likable little boy. At first he comes over, he's very friendly. He's the one who just volunteers to go and get the ball that ran into the bushes, throws it to his friends. He wants to go rescue a little cat. Once he's kidnapped, he sees the other boy there and immediately tries to comfort the other boy, basically letting the other child know that his mom's friend has superpowers. They're going to come and save them. Don't worry, we're going to be rescued. And even at the end, when Prue and Phoebe arrive to save him and he gets his sight back, he says that he knew they would come. He knew that they had superpowers. And I just think he overall is just a really sweet boy, and that is why we are so worried throughout the episode that he's not going to be found. I also like that we're kind of teasing Leo's return in that Piper is having a hard time forgetting Leo, moving on from Leo, and this, of course, the reason that he's kept in our minds as the audience and keeps being mentioned is most likely because, spoiler, he's going to return. And I like how they kind of tease that, how they kind of keep him in our mind because we haven't seen him in a few episodes by having him mentioned every so often by Piper and showing that Piper is reluctant to move on from him and let him go. And even in this episode, when she was in danger and potentially, injured, instead of thinking about the person she was currently seeing, she instead is thinking about Leo. One thing I do think is kind of, honestly, Phoebe and Brent, I gave them an honorable mention on our mostly objective list because I think they had a lot of chemistry. I think they were getting a little bit flirty. And I felt like I really wish they had kind of made him at least a short-term recurring character because I feel like they had a lot of chemistry. He was already a victim of Grimlock, so he knows about the demonic world. He knows about Phoebe because when she has her premonition and she asks him about the clothes he was wearing and what he had heard, because she had seen part of it, he realizes that she also has some sort of power, but is obviously a good person, so he's aware that there is also a good side to the supernatural. And then at the end of the episode, obviously he shows up at the police station. He knows that she is the one who slayed the monsters, offers to talk to the boys because he'd had a similar experience. And, they again have that kind of chemistry that I was like, I would have loved if they had explored that because unlike Andy and Prue, the whole witch secret demonic world that they're fighting, he already knows about that. So she wouldn't have had to keep it a secret. And they had good chemistry, and I think they probably, even if it was just a short term like Josh was, where it's only like a couple of episodes that they're in, I feel like that was something that I wish they had explored, that maybe they had them try dating, because I think it would have been an interesting thing to explore, especially given that chemistry between the characters. So I'm disappointed that they didn't do that. Overall, I felt like it was a very strong episode. The Grimlocks are among my favorite villains of the series. Like, they're very memorable. They do recur one other time. And I do, what am I trying to say? Because I like the main villains of the episode, I feel strongly that the episode is a good one, because the main villains typically are a large part in what makes an episode good or not. However, there were some of like the less positive aspects. The reporter character was very dislikable. I wish there had been like more of Andy's reaction explored. Probably get that in the next few episodes. But, he found out finally what Prue's big secret was, and I feel like overall his his reaction to it was kind of lackluster. I was kind of disappointed. So, what I'm trying to say overall is it was a good episode, wasn't great, there's been better, and so I decided to rank this episode at a 7 out of 10. Which, as a reminder, then brings our season 1 ranking so far on the personal ranking to first place is There a Woogie in the House, Dead Man Dating, The Witch is Back, From Fear to Eternity, that 70s episode, Wicca Envy, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, Something Wicca This Way Comes, Dream Sorcerer, this episode is 10th place, Out of Sight. We then have Feats of Clay, Thank You for Not Morphing, Which Prue Is It Anyway, Secrets and Guys, I've Got You Under My Skin, The Wendigo, When Bad Warlocks Turn Good is 17th place, The Wedding from Hell, and then in 19th place, The Fourth Sister. And now we come to our final segment, which is our series ranking so far, where we are going to be ranking each of the seasons against each other. With the addition of 9 on our mostly objective ranking, we are now at 135 out of 220. And then on the personal ranking, we have added 7 for a total of 122 out of 220. With that, we have now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 1, Episode 19, Out of Sight. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.